Hey, what's going on? Ryan here with Intersection Records, and Monday with Miles Davis. We're talking our first album review of his discography. Again, every week we're going to draw from a bucket an album for Miles Davis, and we're going to take that week to listen to it and review it that next Monday. All these are on Spotify. I don't know about Apple Music, but everything that we're going to do is on Spotify, so you don't have to own it. Last week, we picked this record, Miles Davis and the Modern Jazz Giants. This is a famous album for a couple of reasons. Mainly because it's the only studio album that Miles Davis ever did with Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk, is a legendary bebop pioneer, piano player, born in 1917. So he's 9 years older than Miles. He was there in the very beginning of bebop. In the 30s, really, he was at Mitten's Playhouse in Harlem. Early on, Miles is a pioneer in bebop as well, but really later period. It was really, another bebop pioneers on this record too is Kenny Clarke, born in 1914. Again, 12 years older than Miles. So this album is made up of two famous sessions. One on most of the records from December 24th, 1954. And that is comprised of Kenny Clarke on drums, Percy Heath, part of the Heath brothers, famous for founding, technically not a founding member of the Modern Jazz Quartet. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Modern Jazz Quartet, also Modern Jazz Quartet, Milt Jackson on vibraphone, Percy Heath again on bass, Kenny Clarke on drums, Thelonious Monk on piano, and Miles Davis. So there's one track that's from a different section in October of 56, which features Miles Davis's first great quintet with Red Garland, Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers, John Coltrane, and Miles. Again, this is just a fantastic record. Here's the back of it. Going to show you who's on the record and the track listing, right? And it's interesting. Again, there's just the one tune featuring Coltrane. This didn't get released until 1959. This is on the Prestige label, and it cobbles together part of that December 24th, 1954 infamous recording night is the first and second takes of Bag's Groove, which make up most of the Bag's Groove album that was released before this. So, again, this was recorded on those two dates. It wasn't released until May of 59. It was done at the Rudy Van Gelder studio in Hackensack, which was his parents' house. Later, he would move to his Englewood Cliffs address in New Jersey and do just, Love Supreme and, Out to Lunch and just some of the most famous jazz albums of all time. This is a great record. Again, the only record with Monk in the studio. This thing opens up with the Ira and George Gershwin popular standard, The Man I Love. It starts off with some vibes by Milt Jackson. And then in comes Miles Davis, some muted horn, some regular horn. At the 2:10 mark, Jackson just comes in ripping a solo, and a long vibraphone solo. What is a vibraphone? It's a barred, metal barred instrument that's played with mallets that have a rubber ball inside and then a wrap with yarn. He was one of the great innovators of that instrument. He played with two mallets a lot of times as well. This is a relaxed record. This is not good to be confused with something like Milestones that is more, jammy and more hard bop. This is an example of kind of moods and Miles, taking from Ahmad Jamal and leaving space. In fact, there's an argument on this record that's on record on the second I love the man I love, take one, where Monk and Miles get in an argument about space, and it's documented here. We're going to talk about that later. You know, again, Percy Heath is on bass. When Jackson takes off on his solo, you can just hear Percy Heath just grooving through the chord changes, and it's just beautiful, beautiful playing. He was in the Army, and he was a Tuskegee Airman in 1944. Of course, had brothers, Tootie Heath, or Albert Tootie Heath and Jimmy Heath were his famous brothers as well. So from a big musical family. Kenny Clarke on drums, hitting that ride cymbal. Kenny Clarke is an innovator and a pioneer of using the ride cymbal the whole time instead of just the hi-hat. Also dropping bombs with the bass pedal, kind of unexpectedly dropping what they call dropping bombs with the bass pedal, but really famous for pioneering that hi-hat thing that would be perfected by guys like Tony Williams. The second song is a Miles Davis penned song. It's almost an 11-minute song called Swing Spring. And just like the title suggests, it's more in your face. It's higher energy. This is a great Sunday morning record. This is a great taking a stroll. This is a romantic record. And, some people think there's too much vibes on this album. So again, Swing Spring has more Milt Jackson on it. I've heard people in reviews say there's too much vibraphone on this album. I love the vibraphone. I love it with the combination of Thelonious Monk. It's just beautiful. And you think into the 70s, vibraphone piano duos like Gary Burton and Chick Corea really works well together. Modern day guys like Stefan Harris. Of course, Lionel Hampton was kind of the first king of the vibes. The vibraphone itself was invented in 1917 and really used early in vaudevillian music, and then enters into jazz. Duke Ellington suggested that maybe Hampton, used some vibraphone in the music. The second side opens up with the only song from a different session from October 26th of 1956 is Around Midnight. It just so happens that Thelonious Monk wrote that song. It's the only song on this record that Thelonious Monk does not play on. So the lineup there on Round Midnight, which was penned by Bernie Hegeman, Cootie Williams, and Thelonious Monk, is Paul Chambers, Red Garland, Philly Joe Jones, Coltrane, and Miles. And it's part of the steaming with Miles Davis sessions. They had already had cooking and working. It's not the best representation of what would be the classic, first classic quintet. Coltrane's Miles' first choice was Sonny Rollins when he was putting together the first quintet. But, Rollins developed a heroin addiction, and he took off to get healthy. I think he went to some place in Kentucky and got sober. So Philly Joe Jones says, hey, I know you've worked with Coltrane a little bit in the past. Why don't you give John a try again? He's really playing better than he did back when you first met him in 47, and when you did a couple shows with him and Sonny Rollins back in 52. Think about that show. A show in 52 with Miles, Rollins, Coltrane, probably Kenny Clarke. Just great stuff. Maybe Percy Heath. I'm not sure who was on that show. Anyway, Round About Midnight, not mind-blowing, but it breaks up some of the vibraphone and adds length, frankly, to an album that needs an extra song on it. The next song is another Monk tune with Denzel Best, called Bemsha Swing. Piano iconic riff, kind of leads, Miles smoothly enters. This smooth or cool jazz concept is really more of a marketing thing than an actual movement. But this is not necessarily a bebop record. And it's certainly not a hard bop record. It's somewhere in that cool jazz thing where you're taking your time. You're taking time to let notes breathe and let instrumentalists play. And there's no rush or hurry here. This isn't, hey, look how fast I can play. Even on the Coltrane song, Round About Midnight, it's not about how fast Coltrane can play. And again, there's a lot of that muted trumpet where he puts the mute in like this. It's a really romantic album, like I said earlier. Really kind of just fine, smoother jazz. I love this record. This is a very good entry-level jazz person record, in my opinion. Now, famously, the last song on side 2 is the first take of The Man I Love. And this is a great story on this record. And so again, Thelonious Monk, born in 1917. He was there in New York before Miles got to New York. He's 9 years older than Miles, who was born, in May of 26. So Miles is, the song starts with some vibraphone by Milt Jackson. And they have a false start. That's all on record. And you could hear Monk saying, I'm not sure where I should come in. And ultimately, Miles says, hey, Rudy, put this on the record. Man, all of it. Put this on the record. He wants that little false start to be on the record, and where he's confused on where to come in. The story goes is that Miles doesn't want Monk to play any piano when Miles is soloing, because Monk has an abstract style. Monk has some dissonant chords that he plays. Monk is a very percussive player. And during the solos, really what Miles wants is Kenny Clarke and Percy Heath to play rhythm section while Miles solos over it. And there's legend that there was a fisticuffs during the sessions. That is not true. Miles says this: 1, I was close with Thelonious Monk, and 2, he was a big guy, and I probably wouldn't have done good in a fight. And Monk has also said, hey, there was no fisticuffs, I would have killed the guy. So he says, Miles said Monk was too big and strong for me to fight, That never happened, but it is a famous section, again, on take 2 of the record. But I definitely recommend this record. This is the first album, coincidentally, that I purchased, and actually I didn't purchase. My roommate had it in college, and it's what initially got to my ear about what Miles Davis was. So we are going to pick a record for next week right now in the jar. Again, don't tell my wife I got this. She's going to kill me. What are we going to do for next week? What are we going to pick out for next week for us to listen to and ultimately review? Sorcerer, released in 1967. This is the second great quintet. This is an awesome record, recorded in May of '67 and released in later that year. So Sorcerer, featuring Wayne Shorter, what we'll be dealing with next Monday night on Monday Night with Miles. Have a great week. Peace out. We'll catch you later. See you.